guys, and welcome to day 4 of our Brain Body Kickstarter Challenge. So today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about your sympathetic nervous system, your parasympathetic nervous system, or together the autonomic nervous system. I'm also going to be moving into a little bit of the vagus nerve and giving you some amazing exercises which can be used to calm the nervous system down, especially if you're quite stressed, struggling with focus, struggling with anxiety, or just general fatigue or burnout. And I'm also going to be explaining a little bit about why finding a balance in your autonomic nervous system is really crucial. So we don't just want to be really relaxed, we also don't want to be completely wired out. Finding that good balance between the two and allowing a real reactivity within our nervous system, and allowing an effective reaction rate within our nervous system. So I want to start by just explaining a little bit more about the nervous system. So Louise actually started on the first day talking about the central nervous system, which is your brain, your spinal cord, anything into the center or the midline of the body. So there's another part of the nervous system called the peripheral nervous system, and this basically is everything else. So all your peripheral nerves are your nerves which travel out to anything that is not within the spinal cord. So it's the nerves in your arms and your legs that go to your organs, all of these things which are slightly further afield, out or not in the central part of your nervous system. Now the peripheral nervous system is split into 2 sections. And this is actually a very easy way to remember this. So you have your somatic nervous system and your autonomic nervous system. And so I think of the somatic nervous system as anything that is voluntary. So if you're contracting a muscle, you're consciously contracting that muscle, you're choosing to do it, it is part of the somatic nervous system. Your autonomic nervous system is, and I think of this as automatic or automatic, is anything that you don't think about. So breathing, blinking, digestion, your heart rate, anything which is not a conscious decision that you're going, I must now blink, or I must now digest my food, that you're not controlling is processed by the autonomic nervous system, okay, and is regulated by the autonomic nervous system. Now, the autonomic nervous system is split into 2 sections, your sympathetic and your parasympathetic. And people often think that this is kind of a turn on, turn off, and often the sympathetic nervous system gets quite a bad rep because it is often the part that is overstimulated, can cause burnout, can cause excessive fatigue, especially during stressful times. But what people don't realize is actually your autonomic nervous system functions by both parts, your sympathetic and your parasympathetic, working in balance. And this is the key. It's not about never being sympathetic or turning off your sympathetic nervous system. It's actually about finding the equilibrium between the two and allowing each part of that nervous system to be stimulated effectively for whatever situation you are dealing with. So before I carry on that road, I'm going to explain a little bit for those that don't know the difference between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, just a little bit about what they do. So your sympathetic nervous system, or you may have also heard of this as the fight or flight, is responsible for anything that is stress or stimulating. So if there is a threat, if there is something that you have to react very quickly to stimulate the body, that is your sympathetic nervous system. So it does things like it dilates your pupils, it increases blood flow and therefore also increases or dilates the bronchi in your lungs to absorb more oxygen. It slows your digestive system or your digestion because it actually draws blood away from areas of the body which aren't seen as necessary, such as your digestion, and pumps the blood into the extremities to get you ready to move, to go and do things. Because realistically, if you're running away from a tiger that's about to kill you, the last thing you need to worry about is digesting your dinner. You need to have your hands and your feet or your legs and your arms moving so that you can run and react and get away from that danger. It releases glucose, so it increases your blood sugar and gives you energy, or a boost of energy. It also stimulates the adrenal glands and releases adrenaline into the system, again, to stimulate and create a boost within your nervous system. It also relaxes the bladder, which is why when people get very stressed, they're much more likely to urinate or pee themselves, because that's a highly sympathetic response to a situation. Because of the increased amount of blood flow, it also constricts the blood vessels, which increases your heart rate. So the sympathetic nervous system is basically responsible for anything that allows instinctive reaction to stressful situations. Now, your parasympathetic nervous system is the opposite. So that is your rest and digest. And the parasympathetic basically calms the nervous system down, calms the body, allows it to move away from stressful situations, allows it to recover and rest from that stimuli that you've just placed on there. So the parasympathetic does things like constricts the pupils, it decreases blood pressure, so lowers your heart rate. It also increases the stomach and the digestive motility. So it encourages the use of smooth muscle tissue, or contraction of smooth muscle tissue, which is found in organs such as the digestive tract. So increases and improves digestion. It also increases saliva production. So when you're more sympathetic, you might notice that your mouth gets quite dry. That's because the saliva production is decreased. So when you're parasympathetic, or when you stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system, it actually allows more saliva to be produced. And it also just relaxes the body. It releases and relaxes the nervous system, allowing it to heal and to recover from any stress that it may have endured. Now, while I'm describing this, you might be like, well, why on earth would I ever want to be sympathetic? That sounds horrendous. But what you've got to remember is that every day we are dealing with small stresses, and we're dealing with different things which are putting stress into the nervous system. So even something as simple as lifting weights at the gym is a stress in your nervous system. If you're doing that, you need to have your body reactive. If you're highly parasympathetic while you're lifting weights, you're not going to have the same amount of you're not going to have the same amount of power, you're not going to have the same amount of muscular tension, because your body is really relaxed. This is why finding a balance between these two nervous systems, parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, is so important. Because what you've got to imagine is you've got both nervous systems, and dependent on the situation at hand, you may have to stimulate your sympathetic a little bit, or your parasympathetic nervous system. So the tone of your autonomic nervous system is going to change, or the balance between the two will change. If you're at the gym and you're running, you're training, you're trying to elevate your heart rate, you're trying to get muscular contraction, you're trying to increase blood flow, you're going to need more sympathetic tone so that you're able to do all of these functions and have a productive training session. However, when you've finished, you don't want to stay in this highly sympathetic state. So therefore, the parasympathetic nervous system will need to be stimulated to rebalance out and to allow your body to then recover from the stress that is just endured during that training session. The same occurs for any form of stressful situation. It's not that we want to avoid the stress, and stress in a good, intelligent way is actually very productive for the nervous system. It allows it to become resilient and improves its capacity to deal with stress on a grander scale. However, if we're staying in this highly sympathetic state, that is where problems begin to occur. We get burnout, excessive fatigue, and our autonomic nervous system becomes highly imbalanced. Realistically, in our current lives and in the way that often we are led to lead our lives, we have a tendency to become a lot more sympathetic in nature within our autonomic nervous system. And this is just because our daily lives have become quite stressful and stimulating. Remember, stress and stimulation can sometimes be overlapped. So when we're looking at our phones, when we're looking at highly stimulating, when we have a lot of high stimulating information coming in, such as bright lights, lots of flashing imagery, phones, computers, work stresses, anything that's going on, they have a very large stimulating effect into your nervous system, which is constantly upregulating your sympathetic tone or increasing the sympathetic tone. Now, unfortunately, because this becomes almost like a normal state to be in, we forget that actually it's really just as important to relax. And as I mentioned in my posture video, our brain learns and becomes really good at doing the things that we do all the time. So if we're always in a very highly sympathetic state and we're never allowing ourselves to pull down or draw away from that stimulation, we're going to become used to being in that state, and that is going to be our go-to reaction for any situation. So we're going to almost become hyper-reactive to any form of situation around us. And this is maybe when you might find yourself becoming highly irritable, highly reactive, irrational, emotional. These are all sympathetic responses because we're functioning from a place of threat, a place of stress, rather than calm. So what I want to talk to you a little bit today is about how we can begin to stimulate easily and effectively the parasympathetic nervous system on a daily basis to help allow us to draw back into that parasympathetic state, so that then when we do shift into a more stressful or sympathetic tone of the nervous system, we're able to also easily bring it back with understanding and conscious thought. So this now leads me on to the vagus nerve. Now, the vagus nerve is really important when it comes to parasympathetic stimuli because it is one of the biggest parasympathetic stimuli in the body. The vagus nerve is part of a group of nerves called the cranial nerves, and they are found all except for cranial nerve 1, the olfactory, so for smell, and the optic nerve, which are both part of the central nervous system. The cranial nerves 3 to 12 are found in the brainstem. Their nuclei originate in the brainstem. The cranial nerves are bilateral, so we have one for each side. They're pairs, and they each have a different function when it comes to something around the cranium, so around the head. So we have our oculomotor cranial nerves, which move our eyes in different directions, 3, 4, and 6. We have our cranial nerves which function for our vestibular-cochlear nerve. So our vestibular, that's cranial nerve 8. Our facial nerves is 7. Our jaw or trigeminal is 5. It comes to cranial nerves, or actually anything to do with the brain, when you stimulate an area of the brain, don't just stimulate that one area isolated. It also does have a knock-on effect or a diffusive effect to the areas around it. So this is really useful to know because when we're looking at ways that we can begin to stimulate cranial nerves or a particular area in the brain. So for example, we're looking to stimulate cranial nerve 10, our vagus nerve. This particular nerve can also be stimulated by looking at the areas around it. So if you look at the areas around, that's cranial nerve 9, 11, 12, and also cranial nerve 8 to a point. So this means that by stimulating our jaw or our swallowing actions within our throat, by stimulating our shoulders and releasing our shoulders, and also our tongue and working on our balance, we're actually able to improve the function of our vagus nerve and increase the parasympathetic tone within our nervous system. So before I go on to actually working on the vagal nerve, I want to explain just a little bit about it, where it moves through, where it actually contracts. So I want to just give you a little bit of anatomy, not too much on the vagus nerve. So as I mentioned, it's a cranial nerve 10, and it connects at the base or in the bottom part of your brainstem, the medulla. So it gives a lot of medullary stimulation to the nervous system. It also has links into the ear. It supplies sensation to the posterior part of your auditory canal and the external ear. So this is very important because this gives us a tool to stimulate the vagus nerve by sensory stimulation to your ear. And I will be going through that a little bit in a short while. It then travels down through the neck and splits off onto the right and the left side of your body. So it there has different branches. It has our pharyngeal branch, which supplies motor movements to the pharynx, which is the back of the throat or the soft palate. It goes into the recurrent laryngeal nerve, so it also has connections into the throat or the larynx. It also moves down into the thorax and innervates smooth muscle within the esophagus. It also provides visceral sensation to the heart, so also regulates heart rate and has an effect into the heart rate. It also supplies the esophagus, the stomach, and the small and large intestines or bowels. So as you can see, the vagus nerve is a really, really hugely covering nerve when it comes to functions on both a sensory and a motor manner in the body. But this is amazing because it also means that we have a lot of tools that we can utilize to stimulate it. Because remember, even if we're stimulating more of the parasympathetic outputs of the vagus nerve, it will still be able to stimulate and upregulate the motor or the sensory outputs, which it might have as well. Without going into too much anatomical detail around it, I want to just sum up. The vagus nerve is incredible for parasympathetic stimuli, and is, if you're feeling stressed, any form of use or any form of stimuli into this nerve is going to help to calm and relax the body. So now on to the most important part, and that is the practical application of this information. So it's all well and good knowing all of the academic stuff, but we need to be able to actually utilize it. So I'm going to give you some really easy ways that you can begin to apply vagal nerve stimulation through everyday activities. So basically you can begin to encompass or bring in parasympathetic stimulation easily without having to change your lifestyle, without having to make big alterations or set aside mass amounts of time. So the first thing, or my top tool, is stimulation of nerves or cranial nerves around the vagus nerve. So this is a great way of, we call it stacking, and in the type of work I do, we call it stacking drills to basically create maximal amount of stimulation into one area of the brain. So for the vagal nerve, we can stimulate the glossopharyngeal nerve, which is your throat, and cranial nerve 9. And we can also stimulate cranial nerve 11 and 12, which is your neck, shoulders, and your tongue. So some of the best ways that you can actually begin to do this is target exercises around your throat. So for example, swallowing, actively swallowing and doing maybe just 5 or 10 times, actively swallow, 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 or the swallowing action can begin to create a little bit of upregulation into your vagus nerve, as well as your glossopharyngeal nerve. Utilizing the throat, so humming, singing, gargling, anything where you're utilizing the pharynx or the soft palate, you're lifting the pharynx or the soft palate, again, has an amazing vagal nerve stimuli. And that will, again, bring a huge amount of parasympathetic tone into your nervous system. You can also do neck contraction and relaxation exercises. So I'm actually going to give you some of these in my last video of this challenge, our joint mobility. But one is a simple ACM for your upper trapezius muscle. So you can simply elevate the shoulder and drop the ear towards your shoulder, creating a little contraction here. And then you do the opposite, you depress, and then you tilt the neck away. And you just do this maybe 4 to 5 times. And that creates active contraction or maximal contraction and maximal relaxation. So that's just activating around your neck, shoulders. That's going to be stimulating cranial nerve 11, the accessory nerve, which again will bring in some level of stimulation into the vagus nerve indirectly. As well, you can also look at the tongue movements. The tongue has a huge parasympathetic input into the nervous system. So simple tongue exercises such as running your tongue around your teeth, which is actually, if you do this over a period of time, can be quite muscularly tiring. So you're reaching the tongue as far around your mouth as possible. You can also use sensory stimulation on your tongue, so things like gentle biting or vibration. So if you've got an electric toothbrush and you brush your teeth at night, give your tongue maybe 30 seconds to a minute of vibratory stimulation. This is great for bringing parasympathetic stimuli into your nervous system. Also, stimulating the front teeth can be really great and has been seen to give a really nice input as well. So that's a really nice way to use the surrounding cranial nerves to create not just medullary stimulation for the brainstem, but also indirectly stimulating the vagus nerve. You can also use breathing. So deep breath or deep breathing exercises actually trigger the vagus nerve to send a message to the brain to slow the heart rate. This is because neurons tell the vagus nerve that the heart rate is increasing when you deep breathe, and therefore the vagus nerve communicates this to your brain to slow your heart rate down. So deep breath actually stimulates the vagus nerve and also slows your heart rate and creates a parasympathetic response into the nervous system. There is also an amazing amount of work that can be done through the abdominals and your stomach on a sensory basis. So by simply gently massaging the abdominals or giving some form of sensory stimulation can have a really relaxing effect into the nervous system. And for those that are very, very stressed, heat or constant heat, so I'd actually recommend maybe a hot water bottle, or if you have a big like waist belt or waist trimmer, they're like the big corset type things, you can wear that continuously throughout the day. Not for a corset, but by wearing something over your stomach that's very tight, you create or don't allow body heat to be released from that area and create constant heat around this space. This has an amazing effect, and I actually use it with a lot of my clients as a low-level, low-grade parasympathetic stimulator during the day, and has been shown to really lower anxiety and levels of stress without even realizing it on a very unconscious level. So a waist belt or something that just keeps heat around your stomach is a really awesome, easy tip to use that you don't have to really make big adjustments in your life. Vibration on the ear, just underneath the ridge. So around this area, just underneath this ridge by here. If you add vibration, or you can also just give yourself some sensory stimulation in there as well. It's not quite the same, but just any form of kind of touch sensory stim is really good. And that's actually a point of the vagus nerve, which is amazing to give more parasympathetic tone into the nervous system. There's also another tip that I like to use is when you lie down, interlace your hands and just place your thumbs on the base of the occiput or at the bottom around the occipital muscles, just around that area. And if you just lie your head onto your hands while you're in this position, it actually adds a natural weight or pressure into that area of the neck at the base of the skull. And that again is a point for the vagus nerve. When pressure is applied here, you can give yourself a little massage as well if you really want. Actually again calms the nervous system, creates some parasympathetic tone and allows your sympathetic tone to be rebalanced and decreased. Any use of the tongue or motor movements of the tongue are also really, really good. And one tip I actually like to give to people for this is simply to suck mints or something which they can use as a toy for their tongue. So basically, if you have a mint in your mouth, play with it. I know this sounds silly, but you can run your tongue around it, you can move it around in your mouth, you can put it from one cheek to the other. By just simply playing with a mint in your mouth, you're utilizing motor muscles of the tongue. You're also creating that motor stimuli, which will therefore indirectly again help with vagal nerve stimulation, create more parasympathetic tone and calm the nervous system. Also, something which is great to relax the nervous system is peripheral vision training. However, I am going to be doing a whole separate video on that on the 6th day of our challenge, so tune in for that. And that's also another tool that you can begin to utilize to calm and relax the nervous system itself. I hope this all made sense, and I will hopefully be seeing you on the weekend where I'll be taking us through a breath meditation practice for about 5 to 10 minutes. So again, check out the Facebook group for information on that. That will be posted today. And I look forward to seeing you practice these exercises and seeing how they affect and help your day-to-day life. Thanks so much, and speak to you all soon. So I'm going to take you through a very quick diaphragmatic breath exercise, but I am actually going to be doing a short breathing session of about 5 to 10 minutes on the weekend. So if you are interested in this and you'd like to go through a little bit of a breath practice, I am going to be doing that on the weekend. I will be posting details very soon, so don't worry. It's going to be, will be up on the Facebook group by the end of tonight. But I'm going to explain a brief one so that you can have a little practice now. And what I'm going to do is we're just going to take ourselves into a deep diaphragmatic breath with a focus on the exhalation, okay? So we're going to take our left hand and we're just going to place it at the bottom of your abdomen. And then we're going to take our second hand, we're going to place it onto the diaphragm. Now I want you just to allow your breath to release, close the eyes, come into your body and come into this space. And just allow yourself to note the rhythm, the depth and the speed of your breath as it is right now. So don't change anything, don't worry about anything, just allow it to be as it is naturally. And I want you to note if maybe, are you breathing into your hands, or are you finding that actually a lot of the breath that you're utilizing is coming from the upper part of your torso, your chest, okay? It's coming from around the clavicles or the collarbones. And if that's the case, I want you to start to allow the breath to begin to drop a bit lower into your belly, drop a bit lower into your abdomen. And just allow this breath to just fall and begin to fill the hands that are currently just placed on your stomach and on your chest. And as we're doing this exercise, I want you to try and focus as much as you can into nasal breathing. This just encourages a slightly calmer space for the breath to be in the body. And as you're focusing into this area, filling up underneath your hands, I want you to begin to notice if you can start to slow your exhale a little bit. So fill the lungs up and then try and just slow that exhale, maybe trying to lengthen it, to elongate it, or maybe a count, 2 counts with each round of breath that you take. Until maybe you can start to lengthen the exhale to around double what your inhale was. Okay, and I just want you to note as you're doing this, what's happening to your body. Are you feeling maybe a little bit more weight dropping into the ground or into your chair? Maybe you can feel some release into the shoulders. You can feel some release into the back. And just allow yourself a few more rounds of this breath. And I just want you to slowly release the hands down and just open the eyes and just note how you feel. Do you feel a little bit calmer? Do you feel a little bit more at ease in your body? That is you having stimulated your vagus nerve to create a little bit more parasympathetic tone or relaxation within your body.